Welcome to Heartfelt Revenge Stories. My name is Sienna Matthews and I'm 29 years old. Get out. I'm done paying for another man's mistake. Those words came from my father's mouth as he threw a $50 bill at my face on my 18th birthday. My grandmother sat frozen at the kitchen table. My brother Daniel watched from the doorway. 6 other relatives pretended not to see what was happening right in front of them. 11 years. That's how long I carried a sealed envelope with me everywhere I went. Through nursing school, through endless 12-hour shifts in the children's hospital ward. Through every single Thanksgiving I spent completely alone while everyone else gathered around tables full of family and warmth and belonging. Inside that envelope was one piece of paper. One simple document that could have ended everything, that could have proven the truth once and for all. But I never opened it in front of him. Not because I was afraid of what it said, oh no. I was waiting for the perfect moment when he couldn't look away, when he couldn't hide, when the truth would hit him like a freight train he never saw coming. That moment arrived 6 months ago at his 60th birthday party. 80 guests packed into the backyard. String lights hanging between the trees. A banner stretched across the fence. And when he finally saw what was inside that envelope, when he finally understood who was standing at the door watching him, his face turned a shade of gray I'd never seen on a living person. Please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end. Let me know which city you're listening from in the comments. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. Your support means everything to me. Before I take you to that birthday party, let me take you back to where this all began. Back to a life that looked normal from the outside but was rotting from the inside out. My mother, Catherine, was the only reason our house ever felt like an actual home. She had this incredible ability to stand between me and my father without making it obvious that's what she was doing. A gentle hand on my shoulder when his voice got sharp and cutting. A change of subject when his eyes went cold and distant. She was a buffer between me and his cruelty, soft and constant and almost invisible until the day she was gone. She died of ovarian cancer when I was just 10 years old. The doctors told her she had 6 months to live. She lasted 14 because that's exactly the kind of woman she was. She fought for every single extra Tuesday with us, every Wednesday morning, every Saturday afternoon. She refused to let go until her body absolutely forced her to. Before she got sick, my father was already distant with me. He'd ruffle Daniel's hair at the dinner table, ask him about his baseball games, carry him on his shoulders at the county fair like he was the most precious thing in the world. With me, it was different. Not violent exactly, not loud or dramatic, just empty. Like I was a tenant renting space in his house instead of his daughter. But he kept the mask on while she was alive. He pretended. He played the part of a loving father just well enough that my mother never had to choose between us. The week after her funeral, the mask came off completely. I remember the very first time I heard him say it. He was on the phone with his brother, standing in the kitchen washing dishes. He didn't know I was sitting on the stairs just around the corner, hidden in the shadows, listening to every word. She doesn't look like anyone in this family. Never has. I was 10 years old. I didn't fully understand what he meant in that moment, but I understood the tone. Oh, I understood the tone perfectly. It was the tone of someone washing their hands of responsibility. The tone of someone who'd made up their mind and closed the door forever. After that, it started with small things. Small cruelties that added up over time like drops of water filling a bucket. Daniel got brand new school clothes every August, picked out from the department store with tags still attached. I wore whatever came from the church donation bin, stained hand-me-downs that smelled like someone else's closet. Daniel got the bigger bedroom with the window that faced the backyard. I got moved to the room above the garage where the heating vent didn't work right, and I froze every winter night under thin blankets. Grandma Rose, my father's mother, would visit on Sundays. She'd slip a $20 bill into my jacket pocket when no one was looking and squeeze my hand way too tight, like she was trying to say something with her fingers that she couldn't say with her mouth. It took me 20 years to understand what she was trying to tell me. 20 long, painful years. By the time I was 14, the gap between Daniel and me wasn't a gap anymore. It was a canyon so wide you could throw a stone and never hear it hit the bottom. Daniel got a brand new mountain bike for his 12th birthday. Bright red, 21 gears, a matching helmet. I asked my father for $40 to buy a used biology textbook I needed for school. He didn't even look up from the television. Ask your real father, he said. Just like that. Casual. Like he was telling me what the weather was. Daniel looked at me from across the room. He was 12 and even he knew that sentence was wrong, that it cut deeper than any slap ever could. But he didn't say anything. He never did. I got a job washing dishes at Angelo's Italian restaurant 3 blocks from our house. I was 15 years old. The owner, Mrs. Benedetti, paid me $7 an hour under the table and let me eat leftover pasta after closing time. That pasta became my dinner most nights. Cold marinara and overcooked spaghetti eaten alone in the back kitchen while I scrubbed pots until my hands were raw. Daniel went to soccer camp that summer. 2 weeks upstate at some fancy facility. For $100 my father paid without blinking. He drove Daniel there himself, loaded the car with brand new cleats and a sleeping bag from the sporting goods store, and a duffel bag full of clothes that actually fit. I stayed home that summer. I worked double shifts at Angelo's. I bought my own school supplies with crumpled bills from my tips jar. I learned that nobody was coming to save me, that I had to save myself or drown. The thing about being the invisible child is that you learn to build a life out of scraps. You learn that silence isn't peace. It's just the sound of everyone agreeing that you don't matter. You learn to make yourself smaller and smaller until you wonder if you'll disappear completely. Grandma Rose still came on Sundays, still slipped me money that I hid in a shoebox under my bed. But now when she looked at me, her eyes had something else in them. Something heavier than pity, deeper than sadness. It looked like guilt. She'd hold my face in both hands and whisper, "You're a good girl, Sienna. Don't you ever forget that." I didn't understand then why she said it like an apology, like she owed me something she couldn't give, like she was carrying a secret that was crushing her from the inside out. I understand now. Oh God, I understand now. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Like you were there but nobody really saw you? Drop a comment if you've ever felt that way. Sometimes just knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. The day I turned 18, I baked my own birthday cake. Funfetti from a box I bought with tip money from Angelo's. I made it after my evening shift, standing in our kitchen at 11 o'clock at night while everyone else slept. I set it on the counter, stuck a single candle in the center, and lit it with a match from the junk drawer. I wasn't expecting a party. I wasn't expecting gifts or songs or people who cared. I just wanted to blow out one candle in my own house before I wasn't allowed to anymore, before whatever happened next happened. My father walked in through the back door 20 minutes later. Work boots caked with mud, jacket covered in sawdust, exhaustion written all over his face. He saw the cake sitting there on the counter. He saw the single candle flickering in the dark kitchen. He saw me standing there completely alone at almost midnight on my 18th birthday. He reached into his wallet without a word, pulled out a $50 bill, and tossed it onto the counter like he was tipping a server at a restaurant. "Happy birthday. Get out. I'm done paying for another man's mistake." Grandma Rose was sitting on the sofa in the next room. I heard the creak of the cushion as she leaned forward and then nothing. Complete silence. She didn't stand up. She didn't speak. She didn't defend me. Daniel was on the stairs. I saw his hand tighten on the railing so hard his knuckles went white. His mouth opened and then closed. He wanted to say something, I could see it in his eyes, but the words never came. Nobody said a single word. I picked up the $50 bill, folded it twice, put it in my back pocket and blew out the candle. Then I walked to the hallway phone and called Uncle Marcus, my mother's younger brother. He showed up 40 minutes later in his blue Ford pickup truck, engine idling in the driveway like a rescue boat in a storm. I walked out with one garbage bag of clothes and a pair of shoes that didn't fit right and a heart that was equal parts broken and free. I didn't look back at that house, but I made myself a promise on that porch, standing in the cold with my breath making clouds in the dark air. One day he would know exactly what he threw away, and it would be too late to get it back. What happens when the child you abandon builds a life without you? Stay with me for part 2, where I learn the truth about my mother and everything changes. Uncle Marcus lived above his auto repair shop on Patterson Road. A 2-bedroom apartment with water stains on the ceiling, and a kitchen so small you had to turn sideways to open the refrigerator door. But he'd cleared out his storage closet before I even got there. Put in a twin mattress, a desk lamp he'd bought at the hardware store, and a folded quilt that smelled like motor oil and laundry detergent mixed together. It wasn't much, but it was everything. "You're home now," he said, standing in the doorway of that tiny closet-turned bedroom. "That's all that matters." Marcus was my mother's younger brother. He'd served 8 years in the army, done 2 tours overseas, and came back quieter than when he left. The kind of quiet that carries weight. He opened the repair shop with his separation pay, fixed cars 6 days a week from sunrise to sunset, and lived alone in that apartment above the bay doors. He never married. Never talked about why. There were photos on his fridge of a woman with dark hair, but I never asked and he never explained. He didn't ask me what happened at the house that night. Didn't ask about my father or the $50 or why I was crying in his passenger seat with a garbage bag for luggage. He just pointed to where the bathroom towels were and told me breakfast was at 7. The first week I barely talked. I went to school, came back to the apartment, sat at the desk in my closet room, and did homework until my eyes blurred and my hand cramped around the pencil. Marcus left plates of food outside my door. Grilled cheese sandwiches. Canned soup heated up in a pot. Once, a whole rotisserie chicken he must have bought at the grocery store on his way home from work. On the 8th night, I came out and sat at the kitchen table while he ate his dinner. He looked up, gave me a small nod, and went back to his sandwich. That was it. That was the whole conversation. But something in my chest unlocked just a little bit. Like a door that had been rusted shut for years finally creaking open. I didn't know this then, but Marcus had his own battles he was fighting. I found the chip in his nightstand drawer about a month later when I was looking for batteries. A bronze medallion with a triangle stamped into it, and words etched around the edge. 3 years sober. He'd quit drinking the same year my mother died. He never told me about it. I never asked. He just showed up every single day, steady as a heartbeat, and that was enough. Leaving my father's house didn't set me free. Not really. It just moved the cage to a different location. Because my father didn't stop at the front door. He took his version of the story on the road, spreading it like poison through the family tree. Within a month of my leaving, I started noticing the silence. Phone calls that went unanswered. Invitations that stopped coming. I called Aunt Linda, my mother's cousin, the one who used to braid my hair at Thanksgiving and tell me stories about my mom when she was young. No answer. Voicemail full. I called Brian, my older cousin who taught me to ride a bike when I was 6. Voicemail every single time. I sent a birthday card to Grandma Rose with a note inside telling her I missed her. No reply. Not even a text message. It was Marcus who finally told me what was happening. "Your father's been making calls," he said one night while wiping grease off his hands with a shop rag. "Telling people your mother confessed on her deathbed. Saying Catherine admitted you weren't his." The floor tilted under my feet. The kitchen walls seemed to lean in. "That's not true," I said. My voice sounded far away, like it was coming from someone else's mouth. Marcus's jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle jumping. "I know it's not true, Sienna." "Then why does everyone believe him?" "'Cause he's been saying it for years. And your mother's not here to say otherwise." That was the part that absolutely gutted me. Tore me apart from the inside out. Not that my father was lying. I'd known he was a liar my whole life. It was that he weaponized my mother's death. He turned her final days into a confession she never made. He used her silence, her absence, to rewrite history. And the family bought it because my father was loud and present and told his version first. If I stayed quiet, I didn't just lose my father. I'd already lost him years ago. I would lose my mother's name, her reputation. The only proof she ever existed would be filtered through the mouth of the man who betrayed her. That was the real cost of silence. Not money. Not inheritance. Not some house I never wanted. My mother's memory. Her truth. Her life reduced to his lie. But my father made one critical mistake in his campaign to erase me. He told that story to too many people, including someone who actually knew the truth. The phone call came 3 years after I left home. I was 21, halfway through my nursing program, studying for a brutal pharmacology exam at Marcus's kitchen table. My textbook was open, highlighter in hand, when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. "Sienna, it's Veronica. Veronica Palmer. I was your mother's best friend." I knew the name immediately. I remembered a woman with red hair and a laugh that filled entire rooms. She used to come to our house on Friday nights when I was little. She and my mother would sit on the porch with glasses of wine while my father watched football inside, and they'd talk for hours. I heard what your father's been telling people, Veronica said. Her voice was tight, controlled, like she was holding back a flood with both hands. About your mother. About some deathbed confession that never happened. It's not true, I said quietly. Sweetheart, I know it's not. I was at that hospital every single day during those final 2 weeks. Your mother's last words were about you and Daniel. She told you both she loved you. She never said anything about your father, about paternity, about any of it. Veronica stopped, took a breath that sounded shaky even through the phone. Your mother was the most loyal woman I ever knew. She would have walked through fire for your father even though he didn't deserve it. Then Veronica said something that rearranged every single assumption I'd ever made about my family, about my past, about everything. Your mother didn't have a secret, Sienna. But your father does. The kitchen went very, very quiet. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. What do you mean? I whispered. When your mom was pregnant with you, she started suspecting your father was seeing someone else. She never had concrete proof, but she told me more than once that he'd come home at strange hours smelling like perfume she didn't own. Different perfume. Expensive perfume. I sat back in my chair. The pharmacology textbook blurred in front of me. Veronica, are you saying? I'm saying that if anyone had a reason to question loyalty in that marriage, it wasn't him. It was her. And she never did. She stayed. She loved him. She raised you both in that house even when he made it clear he didn't want one of you there. Veronica's voice dropped even lower. If you ever want the real truth, science doesn't lie. You just need a sample. DNA doesn't have opinions or grudges. Just tells you what is. I thanked her, hung up the phone, and sat in that kitchen for a very long time, staring at nothing, thinking about everything. I waited a full year before I acted on what Veronica told me. Not because I was scared or hesitant. I needed to be absolutely certain I was doing this for the right reason. I wasn't trying to win my father back. I wasn't trying to prove I deserved his love or earn some place at his table. I was trying to protect my mother's name. That was the line I drew in my own mind, and I refused to cross it or blur it or compromise it. The chance came at Thanksgiving. I was 22 in my final semester of nursing school. Daniel called me out of the blue for the first time in 4 years. Dad's going to the football game at noon, he said. His voice sounded nervous, guilty even. Come by the house. Just for 30 minutes. I'll make coffee. We can talk. I drove to the house in Marcus's truck. The neighborhood looked exactly the same. Same cracked sidewalk. Same mailbox with the dented flag. Same houses I'd walked past 1,000 times. Daniel met me at the back door like we'd planned. We sat at the kitchen table in awkward silence. He'd made instant coffee way too strong, in mismatched mugs that had probably been there since I lived in that house. We talked about nothing. Safe topics. His job at the warehouse. My clinical rotations at the hospital. The weather. Normal words stretched over an abnormal silence. Both of us dancing around what we really wanted to say. Then the front door opened. My father stood in the hallway, keys still in his hand. He looked at me like I was a stain on his floor that he'd thought was gone. What are you doing here? His voice was flat. Cold. Daniel invited me. It's Thanksgiving. Daniel doesn't make decisions in my house. Daniel stood up from the table. Dad, come on. It's just coffee. She's not family. Period. That sentence landed like a slap across the face. Not new. Not surprising. But hearing it at 22 felt different than hearing it at 10. 10 it crushed me. Broke me into pieces. At 22 it clarified everything. Made my purpose crystal clear. I stood up slowly. Reached for my jacket hanging on the back of the chair. And on my way out of that kitchen, I did something I'd been planning for weeks. I picked up the coffee mug my father had just set on the counter. Still warm. His fingerprints all over it. His saliva on the rim. His DNA. I slipped it into my coat pocket and walked out the back door without looking back, without saying goodbye, without giving him the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Daniel followed me to the truck. I'm sorry, Sienna. I'm so sorry. I knew he meant it. I could see it in his eyes, hear it in his voice. I also knew he'd never do anything about it. He'd apologize and feel bad and then go right back inside that house and pretend everything was fine. For weeks later, the results came back in a plain white envelope from the laboratory. I opened it at Marcus's kitchen table on a Tuesday morning before my hospital shift. The apartment was completely quiet. Marcus was already downstairs at the shop. Outside, a garbage truck groaned down Patterson Road. I unfolded the letter with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Read the numbers printed in clinical emotionless type. Paternity index: 8,746,291 to 1 probability of paternity: 99.998%. Robert Matthews is the biological father of Sienna Matthews. I set the paper down on the table, stared at it, read it again, and again. I didn't move for 20 minutes. I'd expected this result. Deep down I'd known. Veronica's story, my mother's character, the simple mathematics of it all. I'd known somewhere in my gut that this would be the answer. But knowing something and seeing it confirmed in black ink on official laboratory letterhead are two completely different animals. Knowing lives in your gut, in your instincts. Seeing lives on paper with a reference number and a phone number you can call to verify the results. I cried then. Not the way you cry when you're sad. The way you cry when someone confirms that everything done to you, every cruelty inflicted, every cold word and empty room and ask your real father moment, all of it was for absolutely nothing. 22 years of being called a stranger's child. 22 years of hand-me-downs and cold rooms and being erased from family photos. All of it built on a lie that my father needed to believe because the alternative was looking in the mirror and seeing what he'd actually done. Marcus came home at 6 that evening and found me at the same table, eyes swollen, the letter smoothed flat in front of me like evidence at a crime scene. He read it without touching it, set it down, pulled out a chair. "I know, kid," he said quietly. "I always knew. Mom told you? Your mother told me she never once stepped outside that marriage. Not once. Not even close. I believed her then. I believe her now." I put the DNA results in an envelope that same night. Wrote my father's name on the front in careful letters. Sealed it. Mailed it the next morning from the post office on 5th Street. 2 weeks later it came back. Stamped across the front in red ink. Return to sender. He didn't even open it. Didn't even look inside to see what I'd sent. I put the returned envelope in my nightstand drawer and closed it. I didn't chase him after that. Didn't call. Didn't beg. Didn't try to force him to see the truth. Instead, I did something else entirely. I built a life. The truth was in my hands, but he refused to see it. Part 3 is where I stop waiting for his acknowledgement and start building something he can never take away. Stay with me. I graduated nursing school that May 2nd in my entire class. Marcus sat in the front row of the auditorium wearing a collared shirt I'd never seen before, clapping like I just won an Olympic gold medal. Nobody else from my family came. Not my father. Not Daniel. Not Grandma Rose. Not a single aunt or uncle or cousin. Just Marcus. And honestly, that was enough. More than enough. I got hired at St. Catherine's Community Hospital on the pediatric ward. 12-hour shifts. Rotating nights. More exhausted than I'd ever been in my life, and somehow more useful, more needed, more alive than I'd ever felt. I held newborns whose parents were too terrified to hold them yet. Babies born too early, too small, fighting for every breath. I changed dressings on kids who didn't cry because they'd already learned that crying didn't help, that sometimes you just had to endure. I understood those kids in a way most nurses didn't. I'd been one of them. By the time I was 26, I'd saved enough money for a down payment on my own apartment. A real one-bedroom place on Linden Street with my name on the lease. Nothing fancy. Popcorn ceilings. A radiator that clanked and hissed at midnight like it was haunted. But the lease had my name on it. Just mine. Nobody else's. That was enough. Meanwhile, my father stayed exactly who he'd always been. Daniel got married when he was 25. I wasn't invited to the wedding. I found out through a Facebook post that popped up on my feed while I was eating lunch in the hospital cafeteria. Daniel in a rented tux looking nervous and happy. His bride Amy smiling wide in a white dress. And my father standing behind them with his arm around Daniel's shoulder, grinning like a man with no debts, no secrets, no daughter he'd thrown away. No mention of me. No empty chair. No acknowledgement that the groom even had a sister. I scrolled past it, closed my phone and went back to work. But the family was starting to notice cracks in my father's story. Little fractures spreading through the foundation of his lies. A few cousins had reached out to me over the years. Tentative, careful, testing the waters. They'd seen my nursing license posted online. They knew I was doing just fine without my father's help, without his money, without his approval. And that quiet success made his story harder and harder to sell. Then my father announced his 60th birthday party. 80 guests, catered food, a banner, string lights, and a microphone. He had something planned. I could feel it from 30 miles away, like a storm building on the horizon. Meant break. Have you ever felt like someone was waiting for the perfect moment to humiliate you publicly? That feeling of dread mixed with defiance? Let me know in the comments if you've ever stood on that edge. 6 months before that birthday party, my grandmother died. Grandma Rose, 82 years old, congestive heart failure. She went in her sleep, which was the gentlest thing that ever happened in that family. I didn't go to the funeral. My father made it clear through Daniel that my presence would cause a scene, would upset people, would ruin everything. So I sat in my apartment that afternoon and looked at an old photograph I'd kept. Grandma Rose holding me as a baby, one of the only pictures I had from that house. In the photo she's smiling, but her eyes look like they're carrying something heavier than an infant. Like she knows something terrible and can't say it out loud. 3 weeks after the funeral, I got a phone call from a lawyer's office downtown. Your grandmother left something for you, the woman on the phone said. Not money or property. An envelope. Can you come by this week to pick it up? I drove to the office during my lunch break. The lawyer, a woman with gray hair and kind eyes named Mrs. Hartley, handed me a thick envelope across her polished desk. Your grandmother arranged this 8 months before she passed, Mrs. Hartley said gently. She was very specific about the recipient. This is for you and only you. The envelope was heavy in my hands. My name was written on the outside in Grandma Rose's shaky handwriting. The pen strokes of a woman whose hands were failing but whose mind was sharp as ever. For Sienna only. To be delivered after my passing. I opened it in my car in the parking garage with the engine off and rain drumming on the roof. Inside was a letter. 3 pages written in blue ink on lined paper torn from a spiral notebook. Grandma Rose started with an apology. She told me she'd known the truth for almost 30 years. She'd caught my father with another woman in the back seat of his truck parked behind the Veterans Hall 6 months before I was born. My mother was 7 months pregnant at the time, carrying me. The woman's name was Karen. She worked at the county clerk's office. My father had begged his mother to stay quiet, to not tell my mom, to protect him. And Grandma Rose did. She chose her son over the truth. She chose loyalty to him over loyalty to my mother and to me. And she spent the rest of her life living with what that choice cost. I read the letter 3 times in that parking garage while rain turned the windows into rivers. The second page listed dates, places, details no one could possibly fabricate. The Veterans Hall on Route 9. A Tuesday night in October. Karen wore a burgundy coat. She drove a silver Honda Civic. Grandma Rose described the perfume she smelled on my father's jacket the night she confronted him. Vanilla and something floral. Cheap. Not my mother's signature scent. The third page was the part that broke me completely. Sienna, you were always my granddaughter. You were always Robert's child. Your mother never betrayed anyone. Your father did. And I helped him hide it by staying silent. I'm so deeply sorry. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but you deserve the truth. She'd signed it, dated it, and at the bottom there was a notary stamp. Mrs. Hartley had witnessed the signature in her office, making it a legal document. I called Veronica that same evening, hands still shaking. Grandma Rose wrote me a letter, I said when she answered. She knew about Karen. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. She told you, Veronica finally said. Her voice cracked. You knew Grandma Rose knew? Your mother suspected. Catherine told me once she thought Rose had seen something but was too scared of your father to admit it. Veronica's voice broke completely. Your mother carried that alone, Sienna. She never had proof. Just instinct. Just the feeling that something was wrong. I sat on my couch with the letter in my lap, and the DNA results from my nightstand beside it. And for the first time I saw the complete picture. My father didn't hate me because I wasn't his. He hated me because I was. Every time he looked at me he saw my mother. And every time he saw my mother, he remembered what he'd done to her. The affair. The lies. The betrayal. I wasn't the evidence of her sin. I was the evidence of his. I put both documents into a new envelope, sealed it carefully, set it in my drawer next to the returned DNA results. I wasn't going to chase my father down. But if he ever came for me again, if he ever tried to destroy my mother's memory one more time, I would be ready. I didn't have to wait long. 3 weeks later, Daniel called. It was a Wednesday night. I was folding scrubs on my bed, getting ready for an early morning shift, when my phone lit up with his name. "Hey," he said. His voice was low, like he was standing in a room where someone might overhear. "It's been a while." "Hey, because Amy's pregnant," he said. His voice shook slightly. "And I've been thinking a lot about what kind of family I want this kid to grow up in. And it's not what we had." I closed my eyes, felt tears building behind my eyelids. "Daniel, if I show up at that party, it won't go well." "I know, but I'm asking anyway. Please." I thought about it for 3 days straight. Talked it over with Marcus while we ate sandwiches at his workbench surrounded by tools and engine parts. "What do you want to do?" he asked, looking at me with those steady eyes that never judged, never pushed. "I want to go. For Daniel. For Mom. Then go. Will you come with me? I'll be outside in the truck in case you need to leave fast." That was Marcus. No big speeches. No drama. Just a truck with the engine running and a man who'd never once let me down. Saturday morning arrived clear and bright. I got dressed carefully. White blouse. Simple earrings. Flats. I picked up the envelope from my drawer. The one with both documents inside. The DNA results in Grandma Rose's letter. Just in case. Everything I've endured, everything I've learned, is about to collide with 80 witnesses and a father who thinks he's already won. Part 4 is where the truth explodes. Don't go anywhere. The party was already in full swing when I pulled up to the house. My father's house. The house I grew up in. It sat on a quarter-acre lot at the end of Maple Drive, looking exactly the same as it had when I left. The lawn had been freshly mowed for the occasion. String lights zigzagged between the garage and the fence posts, glowing softly in the late afternoon sun. A folding table by the gate held a cooler full of drinks, stacks of paper plates, and a massive sheet cake with Happy 60th Robert piped across it in blue frosting. I could hear country music blasting from a Bluetooth speaker on the porch. Voices layered over each other in that comfortable noise of people who belong somewhere, who fit. I parked on the street 2 houses down. Checked my bag one more time. The envelope was there, tucked between my wallet and a pack of tissues. Marcus's truck was parked across the street, engine off, windows cracked. He caught my eye in the side mirror and gave me a single solid nod. I walked through the gate. The backyard was absolutely packed. 80 people, maybe more. Aunts and uncles I hadn't seen in years. Cousins. Neighbors. Guys from my father's plumbing crew. Women from the church. Kids running between legs, shrieking and laughing. Someone was grilling burgers. The air smelled like charcoal and cheap beer and freshly cut grass. A few heads turned when I walked in. Conversations stuttered and stopped mid-sentence. An aunt whose name I'd forgotten leaned toward the woman beside her and whispered something behind her hand, eyes darting toward me. Daniel met me at the gate. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. "You came," he said, relief flooding his face. "I came." He led me to a chair at the very last table, the one closest to the back fence, as far from the main gathering as possible without actually leaving the party. I sat down, set my bag on my lap, held it tight. Then I looked up and found my father's eyes across the yard. He was standing at the head table, beer bottle in hand, surrounded by friends and laughter. His smile disappeared the second he saw me, and I understood right then that this was never going to be a quiet evening. For the first hour, my father pretended I wasn't there. He worked the crowd like a politician. Handshakes, backslaps, loud laughs. He was good at this performance. He'd spent 60 years perfecting it. The hardworking plumber. The devoted father. The man who sacrificed everything for his family. It was convincing. It always had been. Around 7 o'clock, someone clinked a glass loudly. The music faded. My father walked to the center of the yard where a microphone had been set up next to the cake table. He tapped the microphone twice. Feedback squealed. The crowd gathered in a loose semicircle around him. I stayed at my table, hands gripping my bag. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," my father said into the microphone. 60 years. Can't believe it. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Applause. He talked about his life, his business, how he'd built his plumbing company from nothing, how he'd raised his family in this very house, on this very lawn. He gestured around the yard and people nodded approvingly. Then he called Daniel up to stand beside him. Daniel walked slowly to the microphone, hands shoved in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. My father put his arm around Daniel's shoulders and pulled him close. "This is my boy," he said into the microphone, voice warm and proud. "My only boy. My legacy." He said it with the warmth of a father and the precision of a surgeon cutting away dead tissue. My only boy. Not my oldest. Not one of my kids. My only. A few guests glanced in my direction. I kept my face perfectly still, perfectly calm. "Some of you know," my father continued, and his voice shifted lower, more deliberate, "that my first wife made certain choices. Choices I had to live with for 18 years. He paused. Let that sentence hang in the air like smoke. "I won't go into detail tonight, but I want to make something official." He looked out at the crowd with the calm authority of a man who believed he'd already won every battle that mattered. "This house," he said, one hand still on Daniel's shoulder, the other gripping the microphone. "Everything I've built. It all goes to Daniel. Because family means blood. Real blood." Scattered applause. Uncertain. Some people clapped too hard, trying to fill the awkward silence. A neighbor hooped. One of the plumbing crew guys raised his beer. Then Brian, my cousin, standing near the drink cooler, said what no one else would. "What about Sienna?" It came out quiet, but the microphone caught the silence that followed. My father heard. His head turned slowly toward Brian, then toward me. He smiled. The kind of smile that isn't a smile at all. "Sienna," he said, chuckling into the microphone. "She's here as a guest tonight. Not as my daughter." The entire yard went still. Someone set down a plate. A child's voice carried from somewhere near the house, oblivious to the tension. But my father wasn't finished. He looked directly at me across 80 people, across 29 years of lies, and said the thing he'd been rehearsing his entire life. I kept my mouth shut for years out of respect for her mother's memory. His voice was steady, practiced, perfect. But since she decided to show up here tonight, I think everyone deserves to know the truth. He paused for effect. She was never mine. I felt every single pair of eyes in that yard land on me like spotlights. Veronica Palmer, sitting 2 tables away, reached over and put her hand on my shoulder. Her fingers pressed hard, a silent message. "I'm here. You're not alone." I sat perfectly still. My hands were under the table, gripping the strap of my bag so hard my knuckles ached. My heart hammered so loud I was sure the woman next to me could hear it. But my face didn't move. Not one muscle. Because I'd been waiting for this moment. Not hoping for it. Not planning it. But prepared. The way you prepare for a storm when you've watched the sky turn dark for 29 years. My father smiled at the crowd, triumphant, vindicated. He had absolutely no idea what was in my bag. I stood up slowly. The metal chair scraped against the patio stone. A small sound that cut through the silence like a knife. Every head turned toward me. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't rush. I spoke the way I speak to parents at the hospital when I'm delivering test results they didn't expect. Clear. Measured. Calm. "Robert," I said, and the use of his first name made several people flinch. "You've spent 29 years telling that story." I paused. Let the sentence breathe. "Can I have 60 seconds to tell mine?" His smile faltered just slightly. A crack in the plaster. He shrugged, gestured with his beer bottle like he was being generous. "Go ahead. Won't change the facts." "Thank you." I opened my bag slowly, pulled out the envelope. It was thick, cream-colored, worn at the edges from years in a drawer. My father's name was written across the front in my own handwriting from 7 years ago. I held it up so the people near the front could see clearly. Some of you might not know this, I said, but 7 years ago I mailed this envelope to Robert. He sent it back unopened. I turned it so the red return to sender stamp was visible to everyone. He didn't want to know what was inside. A murmur rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. My father's jaw tightened. What is that? He demanded. This is what you were too afraid to open. I broke the seal. The paper tore cleanly. Inside were 2 documents folded together. I separated them carefully, held the first one up. My hands were steady. My voice was steady. My whole body was a straight line drawn through 29 years of being told I didn't count. I'm going to read 1 paragraph, I said clearly. And then I'm going to leave. And you can all decide for yourselves what's true. 80 people held their breath. I unfolded the DNA results and read them out loud in a voice that carried across that entire backyard. Paternity test conducted by Westside Genomics Laboratory. Dated March 14, 2019. Sample A cheek swab Sienna Matthews. Sample B saliva trace Robert Matthews. I looked up. My father's face had gone completely rigid. The beer bottle in his hand had stopped halfway to his mouth. Paternity index. 8,746,291 to 1. I let that number sink in. Combined probability of paternity. 99.998%. I lowered the paper slowly. Robert Matthews is the biological father of Sienna Matthews. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Packed tight with the sound of 80 people recalculating everything they believed for 3 decades. Somewhere near the back a spoon hit a plate. Someone inhaled sharply. A woman I didn't know covered her mouth with both hands. My father spoke first, of course he did. That's fake, he said. His voice was flat, controlled, but color was draining from his face like water from a tub. She fabricated it. I held the paper toward Brian, who was standing closest to me. Lab name, phone number, case reference number. All printed at the bottom. Call them right now if you want to verify. Brian took the paper carefully. Read it slowly. Looked up at my father. It's from Westside Genomics, Robert. This is legitimate. I don't care where it's from, my father snapped. The reference number is right there, I said calmly. Anyone with a phone can verify it in 5 minutes. My father's mouth opened, closed, opened again. This doesn't prove anything. But his voice had changed. The command was gone. What was left sounded thin, hollow, like a man standing on a floor that just started to crack beneath his feet. I didn't argue with him. I didn't need to. The paper was doing all the work. I reached into the envelope for the second document. The DNA is only half of it, I said. I unfolded Grandma Rose's letter. 3 pages of lined paper covered in shaky blue handwriting. The crowd leaned in. You could feel the shift in energy, like everyone sensed the ground was about to move again. This is a letter, I said, written by Grandma Rose. Your mother, Robert. Written 3 months before she died. Notarized by her attorney. Something crossed my father's face. Not anger. Something older and deeper. Fear. My mother wouldn't, he said, but his voice cracked. She did. I didn't read the entire letter. That wasn't mine to share. I read 2 sentences. The only 2 that mattered. I caught Robert with a woman named Karen behind the Veterans Hall in October, 6 months before Sienna was born. Catherine never cheated. My son did. And I stayed silent because I was a coward. The yard erupted. Not in noise. In motion. People shifted in their chairs. Hands flew to mouths. Eyes darted between my father and me like spectators at a car crash they couldn't look away from. My father grabbed the edge of the table. His knuckles went white. She was confused, he said desperately. She was old. She was sick. Veronica Palmer stood up from her chair slowly, deliberately. Every single person in that yard watched her rise. She wasn't confused, Robert, Veronica said. Her voice was clear and unshaking. I was there too. Catherine cried on my couch for 3 hours the night she found out about Karen. She never once thought about leaving you. But you? You never stopped punishing her for what you did. The microphone was still on. Every word carried across that backyard like thunder. Daniel, who had been standing beside my father this whole time, took 1 step back. Then another. His face was white. His mouth was pressed into a thin line. He hadn't known about any of this. The truth is out, the lies are crumbling, but my father has one more move to make. Part 5 is where everything ends and everything begins. Stay with me for the final chapter. What happened next was the saddest part of the entire evening. Not because I felt sorry for my father. I didn't. I never would. It was sad because I watched a man try desperately to save a lie that had already died. And he couldn't stop himself even as it destroyed him. "This is my birthday," my father shouted, his hand slamming the table so hard paper plates jumped. A cup of soda tipped over and nobody moved to pick it up. "You planned this. You came here to destroy me." "I came because Daniel asked me to," I said quietly. "She's trying to get the house," my father yelled, looking around wildly for someone to agree with him. "She's been scheming for years." "I don't want your house, Robert." My voice was level, calm, final. "I have my own home. I pay my own rent. I don't need anything from you. I never did." He looked around the yard desperately, searching for an ally, for someone to nod, to step forward, to say she's lying, she's manipulating, she's the problem. But every face he found was either looking away or looking through him like he was already gone. Brian set the DNA results on the table carefully, folded his arms across his chest. Aunt Linda was crying quietly into a napkin, mascara running down her face. A man from my father's plumbing crew, I didn't know his name, put down his plate and walked toward the gate without a single word. Then Daniel spoke. "Dad." His voice cracked completely in half. "Is it true? About Karen?" The whole yard went absolutely still. My father looked at his son. His golden child. The one he'd built his entire identity around. His legacy, his only boy. And for one brief moment I thought he might actually tell the truth. I thought 30 years of lies might finally collapse under their own unbearable weight. But my father just stood there, jaw working, eyes wet, saying absolutely nothing. And that silence, that refusal to deny it when it mattered most, was louder than any confession could ever be. Daniel's hand dropped from his father's shoulder. "That's what I thought," Daniel whispered. My father was still standing upright, but everything underneath him had already fallen away. I could have stopped there. The DNA was red. The letter was out. The silence had spoken. But my father had asked one question for 29 years, thrown it in my face over and over, and I decided right then, standing in that yard with 80 witnesses, that he deserved an answer. "You always wanted to know who my real father is," I said clearly. My father's eyes snapped to mine. "He's standing right outside." I pointed toward the front of the house. Through the side gate, past the driveway, you could see the street clearly. And there, parked under the elm tree, was Marcus's blue Ford pickup truck. And there, leaning against the driver's side door with his arms crossed, calm as Sunday morning, was Uncle Marcus. He wasn't trying to make an entrance or prove a point. He was just there. Steady. The way he'd been for 11 years. My father moved slowly to the edge of the yard and looked through the gate. When he saw Marcus standing there, something drained completely from his face. The last trace of color. The last thread of authority. He looked like a man watching his own house burn from across the street, powerless to stop it. "Marcus taught me to drive," I said. My voice carried across the silent yard. "Marcus paid for nursing school. Marcus showed up every single Christmas, every birthday, every hospital shift when I was too tired to stand." I paused. "You didn't." I folded both documents carefully and placed them on the table in front of my father's empty chair. "DNA says you're my father, Robert. But Marcus is my dad." The envelope sat on the table between a paper plate and an untouched slice of birthday cake. "Keep these," I said. "This time try actually opening them." I picked up my bag, smoothed my blouse, and walked toward the gate with my head high and my shoulders back. Behind me I heard a chair scrape. Then another. Aunt Linda's footsteps followed mine. Veronica was already at the gate, holding it open, tears streaming down her face. Brian nodded as I passed. Didn't say anything. Didn't need to. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I just walked out of that yard, down that driveway, into the rest of my life. Marcus opened the passenger door before I even reached the truck. I climbed in. He closed it behind me gently, walked around to the driver's side, got in, started the engine. Neither of us spoke for 2 full blocks. The street was quiet. Porch lights clicked on as evening darkened into night. A sprinkler hissed somewhere on a lawn we'd already passed. "You okay?" Marcus asked, eyes on the road. "I'm done," I said. The words came out like a breath I'd been holding for 29 years. Finally, I'm done. He nodded, reached over and turned on the radio. Lo, some country station playing a song I didn't know. Pedal steel and a quiet voice singing about finding your way home. And then I cried. Not the way I cried in Marcus's kitchen at 22 when the DNA results first came back. That was grief sharp and cutting. This was different. This was the sound of something impossibly heavy being set down after carrying it for so long your arms forgot what empty felt like. I cried for my mother, who never got to defend herself, who carried suspicion and hurt alone. For Grandma Rose, who tried to make it right too late, when her hands were failing and time was running out. For the 10-year-old girl sitting on the stairs who heard her father call her nobody. For the 18-year-old who baked her own birthday cake and got $50 thrown in her face like spare change. I cried for all of them. For all of me. And then I stopped. Marcus didn't ask me to explain. Didn't offer wisdom or a pep talk. He just drove, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the console between us, close enough to reach if I needed it. When we pulled into the parking lot behind his shop, he killed the engine and sat for a moment in the quiet. You said what needed to be said, he told me. That's enough. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, looked at the staircase leading up to the apartment where I'd rebuilt my entire life from absolute zero. Yeah, I said softly. It is. Meant break. Have you ever had a moment where you finally said the truth you've been carrying for years? Where you set down the weight and walked away? Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote an email. Not to my father. To Mrs. Hartley, the attorney who'd handled Grandma Rose's letter. I kept it short. 3 paragraphs. Professional. I stated clearly that I had absolutely no interest in my father's property, his savings, or any form of inheritance. I was not filing a lawsuit. I was not pursuing any legal claim against him. I wanted exactly one thing. That Robert Matthews stop repeating the story that Catherine Matthews confessed to infidelity on her deathbed. Because there was now documented evidence, a DNA test and a notarized letter from his own mother, proving that story was completely false. If the story continued to circulate, I reserved the right to share both documents more broadly, including with his business contacts and community organizations. This was not a threat. It was a boundary, clear and firm. Mrs. Hartley forwarded the email to my father's contact information on file. I never received a response. Not a word. That same week, I mailed photocopies of the DNA results to every family member whose address I had. 12 envelopes total. Each one included a brief note on a single index card. I am not asking anyone to choose a side. I am only asking that you know the truth. My mother, Catherine Matthews, was faithful. The enclosed documents confirm this. If you have questions, the lab's phone number is on the letterhead. I signed each card with just my name. No anger. No pleading. Just fact. Then I blocked my father's phone number. Not because I hated him. Because I was finally completely finished having a conversation that only went one direction. Marcus watched me seal the last envelope from across the kitchen table. That's it? He asked. That's it. No court. No lawyers. No judges. I don't need anyone to tell me who I am. He almost smiled. Almost. Your mother would have said the exact same thing. That was the best compliment anyone had ever given me in my entire life. Daniel called 1 week later. It was late, almost 11 at night. I was on the couch in my apartment, half watching a baking show on mute, when his name lit up my phone screen. Hey, I answered. Hey. His voice sounded hollowed out, scraped clean. Did you know? He asked quietly. About Karen? Before Grandma Rose's letter? No. Not until the letter. A long, shaky breath on the other end. I've been looking stuff up. I called the lab. The DNA is real. I know. He won't talk to me. He's been locked in his room since the party. Won't answer calls. Won't come to work. I had to cancel 3 jobs this week because we don't have enough crew. I didn't say I'm sorry because I wasn't sure what I'd be apologizing for. The party ended right after you left. Daniel continued. Half the guests walked out within 10 minutes. Dad just sat at the head table by himself until it got dark. I had to bring all the food inside. He didn't move. Pictured it. My father alone at a decorated table, surrounded by empty chairs and string lights buzzing in the growing darkness. I waited for satisfaction to arrive, for some sense of victory. It didn't come. Just a dull ache in a place I thought had scarred over completely. Daniel, I said gently, you don't have to choose between us. I know. But I'm done pretending everything's fine when it's not. I know that too. There was a pause. Then Daniel's voice shifted, softer, almost shy. Amy's due in 4 months. It's a girl. My hand tightened on the phone. Oh, Daniel. That's wonderful. Jenny told me something last week, he said, and now he was definitely crying. Quietly. The way men cry when they've only just learned how. She said if I ever treat our daughter the way Dad treated you, she'll walk out that door and never come back. His voice broke completely. I want her to know her Aunt Sienna. She will, I promised. I absolutely promise you that. The fallout didn't come in a dramatic wave. It came like leaks in a dam. Slow. Steady. Impossible to plug. Within 2 weeks of the party, 3 men from my father's plumbing crew quit. All 3 had known my mother personally. One of them, a guy named Frank who'd worked with my father for 11 years, told Daniel on his way out the door, I can't work for a man who'd do that to his own kid. I just can't. My father's crew went from 6 people to 3 overnight. He lost a major commercial contract with a property management company because he couldn't staff the job anymore. Money didn't dry up completely, but it shrank. And in a small town, when your crew walks out, people notice. They talk. The church noticed too. My father had been a deacon at Grace Hill Community Church for 15 years. Not a paid position, but one that mattered. It meant he read scripture on Sundays, organized the food drive every November, shook hands in the church lobby. Pastor Williams called my father in for a private meeting. I don't know what was said behind that closed door. But the following Sunday, my father's name was missing from the church bulletin. A woman named Patricia read the scripture instead. Neighbors adjusted their relationships too. The Johnsons, Carol and Tom, both in their 70s, who'd lived next door to my father since before I was born, brought a tin of homemade cookies to Marcus's shop one afternoon. For Sienna, Carol said, pressing the tin into Marcus's grease-stained hands. Catherine was the kindest woman on this entire street. We should have said something sooner. We should have stood up for her. Marcus brought the cookies home that night and set them on the kitchen table. I ate 3 and cried a little, because sometimes kindness hits harder than cruelty ever could. Brian posted something short on Facebook. Just 1 sentence. Truth has a way of finding daylight. He didn't tag anyone. Didn't name names. He didn't have to. The comment section filled up within an hour with people who understood exactly what he meant. My father didn't leave his house for 2 full weeks after the party. A month after everything exploded, a letter arrived at Marcus's shop. Hand-delivered by Daniel. Not mailed. My name was on the front in my father's handwriting. Blocky. All caps. The penmanship of a man who writes work orders and invoices, not apologies. I opened it at the counter while Marcus rebuilt a carburetor 3 feet away, pretending not to watch but absolutely watching. The letter was short. 6 sentences. Sienna, I know things got out of hand. I made mistakes. The house is still your home if you want it. Come back so we can talk. Dad. I read it twice, searching carefully for the one word that would have actually mattered. It wasn't there. No sorry. No, I was wrong. No acknowledgement of what he'd actually done. Not the lie about my mother. Not Karen. Not the 18 years of erasure. Not the $50 bill. Not the speech in front of 80 people. Just mistakes. Passive. Unnamed. Floating in the air like smoke from someone else's fire. And come home. As if I'd been the one who left. As if the door had always been open and I'd simply chosen not to walk through it. As if the problem was geography and not 30 years of calculated cruelty. I folded the letter carefully. Put it in the drawer next to the returned envelope and Grandma Rose's letter. Closed the drawer. Marcus looked up from the carburetor, wiping his hands on a rag. You okay with that? He asked. I will be. That same week, Daniel came to visit me at my apartment. First time ever. He brought an ultrasound photo. A grainy black and white image of a baby girl curled like a tiny comma inside Amy's womb. He stood in my kitchen, too tall for the space, awkward and nervous, and held the photo out to me with both hands. We're naming her Catherine, he said quietly. I took the photo, held it carefully with both hands like it was made of glass. Does Dad know? I asked. Yeah. What did he say? Nothing. He didn't say anything at all. Some silences are confessions louder than words. That one definitely was. 3 months passed. The sharpest edges softened. Not into forgiveness. I would never forgive what he'd done. But into distance. And distance, I've learned, is its own kind of mercy. I kept working at St. Catherine's. Morning shifts mostly. The pediatric ward is the kind of place that resets your perspective every 12 hours. You hold a 3-day-old baby who just had open heart surgery, and suddenly your own problems feel survivable. One morning, a newborn girl wrapped her entire tiny fist around my index finger and wouldn't let go. I stood there beside the incubator for 5 full minutes, just breathing, just being held by something that's small and perfect. After my shift, I drove to Marcus's shop like I did most afternoons. We ate lunch at his workbench. Turkey sandwiches, potato chips, 2 cans of ginger ale, surrounded by engine parts and the smell of oil and metal. Your birthday's next month, Marcus said, wiping mustard off his thumb. 30. The big one. What do you want to do? I thought about it for a moment. Bake a cake, I said. A real one. Invite Daniel and Amy. Invite Veronica. Invite Linda and Brian. Blow out the candles. I paused. Actually blow them out this time. Marcus smiled. A real one. The kind that crinkled the skin around his eyes and made him look 10 years younger. Finally get to do it right, he said. Yeah, finally. I looked up at the wall behind Marcus's kitchen table. The $50 bill was there, framed in a cheap black frame from the dollar store. I'd hung it the week I moved into my first apartment, not out of bitterness or revenge, but out of memory. That bill was the price my father put on me. $50 for 29 years of a daughter he refused to claim, to love, to see. I was worth more than that. I'd always been worth more than that. I just needed a while to believe it myself. If you're listening to this story and you have a Robert in your life, someone who's spent years making you feel worthless, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I don't know your situation. I don't know what you've survived or what you're surviving right now. I don't know if your Robert is your father, your mother, a sibling, a partner, or someone else who decided you weren't enough and spent years making absolutely sure you believed it. But I know this with complete certainty. You don't owe loyalty to someone just because you share DNA. Blood doesn't automatically earn trust. Behavior does. Actions do. Showing up does. And the people who truly love you, really love you, are the ones who show up without being begged, without conditions, without keeping score. My mother couldn't protect me anymore. She ran out of time. Grandma Rose knew the truth for 3 decades but was too afraid to speak until it was almost too late. Daniel loved me, but didn't have the courage to stand up until the walls were already crumbling around us. Uncle Marcus had no obligation to me. None. I wasn't his daughter by law, by blood, by any legal document anyone could file. He was just a man with a spare room and a simple decision to make. Show up or don't. He showed up. Every single day. When I couldn't sleep at 3 in the morning. When I failed my first clinical exam. When I sat in his kitchen at 22 crying over DNA results that confirmed what he'd already known in his heart. He never said, "I'm your father now." He didn't have to. He just was. I didn't win because of a piece of paper. I won because I stopped letting one man's lie define my worth. The DNA didn't set me free. Deciding I was done, that set me free. Setting a boundary isn't revenge. It's not cruelty. It's not even anger. It's the first time you choose yourself over someone else's comfortable lie. If nobody's told you that today, I'm telling you right now. So here's where things stand. I'm 29, about to turn 30. I still work the pediatric ward at St. Catherine's Hospital. I still eat lunch at Marcus's workbench on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He still makes the sandwiches too thick, way too much turkey, and I still don't complain. Daniel calls me every Sunday now. It's the first real relationship we've ever had. Not built on shared trauma or a shared house or a shared father. Just the simple choice to pick up the phone. Amy sends me photos of her growing belly every few days. The nursery is painted soft yellow now. There's a name stenciled on the wall in white cursive letters. Catherine. Baby Catherine was born 2 months ago. 7 pounds 4 ounces. 3:47 in the morning on a Tuesday. I was in the waiting room. Marcus was beside me, reading a car magazine, patient as always. Daniel came through the double doors in wrinkled scrubs, eyes red from exhaustion and joy, grinning so wide it looked like his face might actually split in half. "You want to hold her?" he asked. I held my niece for the first time. She had dark hair like mine. Like our mothers. Veronica and Linda were at the hospital too. Veronica brought flowers. Linda brought a blanket she'd crocheted in secret, soft pink with white stars. We stood around Amy's bed and passed that tiny baby from arm to arm. And for a few precious minutes we were the kind of family my mother would have wanted. My father? I don't know. I don't ask. Daniel doesn't bring it up and I don't push. I heard through Brian that he's still in the house on Maple Drive. Alone. Not broke. Just empty. The $50 bill is still framed on my wall. I see it every single morning when I make coffee in my kitchen. It reminds me where I started. It reminds me what someone once thought I was worth. And it reminds me they were wrong. My name is Sienna Matthews. I am my father's daughter. Just not the father who threw me out. If Sienna's story reminded you of someone or reminded you of yourself, drop a comment and tell me what boundary you finally set. What weight did you put down? I read every single comment. If you want more stories like this about standing your ground and finding your worth, check the links in the description. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Thanks for being here. Truly, you matter more than you know.